And here we go. Welcome to episode 1 of the Process Podcast. I'm your host, Paul McCarran. And so for the last month or so, I've been setting up this podcast studio. As you can see, it's kind of getting there. It's always going to be adding to it. But it's been great. So the Process Podcast, what is it? So I have kind of realized that I enjoy talking to people and I love kind of getting in deep conversations with others, figuring out about their lives, how they become successful, what they're driving towards, what they're striving towards. So the process is going to be a mostly guest-oriented podcast where we dive into people's lives that are successful in the core areas of life. So finances, business, relationships, spiritually, time, work, management, productivity, anything like that, where I feel like I can provide my audience, which is like a self-improvement, self-growth based podcast, and provide them with things that are applicable to their life. Real processes that they can use in their daily lives. Aspire to be successful in some of these journeys that people on the podcast have already done. So looking at people, entrepreneurs, influencers, business people of all sorts, people of faith who are spiritually strong and have a strong faith. And so that's where the Process Podcast is going. I've had this ideation in my head for a while. Having a podcast is something I've really thought about for years now. And so I had started something with one of my buddies. We had 6 episodes go out and we had one guest on and it was awesome. But I wanted to go like a one-on-one route where I could really dive into conversations with one person at a time. I feel like that can get a deeper level of like conversation going. And so I've set up this studio, and so for this episode, it's going to be more of a short one. It's going to be one of the more rare occasions where it's just me on the podcast. It will still happen at times if I can't get a guest on or whatever it may be. We're going to dive into my story, kind of where I'm at, what I'm doing, and how I got here, how I landed on the podcast, how I'm making ends meet for now, and just kind of full transparency into my life, what inspires me, what drives me, how I'm here. So kind of right now, currently, I'm a server assistant and I'm working to do that to make ends meet, going in every day, working my hardest, trying to, make people's days when I see them, interactions. I'm a big believer in, you never know what someone's going through, and it doesn't matter, like the smallest little things you go out of your way to do, like smile at someone, say hi to someone, or just ask someone how their day is, can make or break someone's day. You don't know what they could be going through or what you could say to change the direction of their day or life, because someone cares. It shows that someone cares. Why would you care about a random stranger? But if you're able to do that for someone, it could change their day. And so that's kind of what I look at when I'm going in every day at work. How can I make a difference today? Maybe it's my coworkers. Maybe it's someone eating at the restaurant. Whatever, but I'm really enjoying it. I'm keeping busy. It's a new schedule. It's a lot of my shifts are at night, finishing up around midnight, 2 a.m. So I'm getting used to that on that aspect. But so currently, and then I've been setting up this podcast studio, and it's finally coming to life. And it's so exciting. I have this studio. I've built it kind of from the ground up. And a lot of you have kind of seen this process over my short form social media content, where I've kind of had a break the last week or so, but all my content's going to shift towards more podcast content, more long form like I feel like you can get a deeper level of interaction with someone through long form content. So that's where the content's going. And backtrack it a little bit, how I came to Tampa. So I actually moved to Tampa in a financial analyst role. And, the company I was working for just didn't have a great culture, wasn't learning a lot, and kind of had a lot different expectations. And on top of that, I wasn't extremely passionate or have really any interest in the finance field or what I thought I did. I didn't really know what my passions were in school. I didn't know what I wanted to pursue. And so when I quit my job, I was like, what should I do? Because this was about 3 or 4 months ago, 2 months ago-ish. And I kind of landed on, maybe I'll do this marketing agency, provide companies with marketing services to be able to get them returns on their business. But I kind of dove deep into it and I realized, why did I want to do that? And it was kind of because it sounded like the thing that made sense. It was like what I was supposed to do, not what I was meant to do. And when I really dug down, and for me, which we'll dive into, my faith is big, and I kind of prayed about it, thought about it, and what God had for me. It was this podcast and speaking to people, relaying positivity every day through the podcast or weekly. And so that's what I ended up. I was actually at the gym, and I was talking to one of my buddies, and he was like, yeah, like I'm with this guy. He said he's hop on your podcast. And it was this guy with a bigger following on Instagram. And I was like, well, why didn't I do that in the first place? And so I was with one of my friends, and we were hitting the sauna. Shout out to my buddy Kelton. And he was just like, well, if you're at ground zero with the marketing and you're at ground zero with the podcast, why don't you just go all in on the podcast? And I was like, huh. And I kind of thought about it for a second. And I was like, well, honestly, it was just because I was scared of what others might think of saying, I'm quitting my job to go all in and on a podcast. Which kind of like, it almost sounded a little crazy to me, which, yeah, you got to kind of analyze those things and realize it. So I went home for a couple hours that day, the next day, and just thought about it. And I was like, well, I'm going to do this. I mean, I'm going to have something to support it. So that's when I started looking for jobs, got the server assistant job. And yeah, so that's how I landed on doing this, which my passion's talking to people. And at the end of the day, my purpose is I want to make a positive impact and influence on people's lives. And I feel like this is a venture and an avenue of doing that. And yeah, so bringing me back to getting to Tampa. And so actually last weekend, I want to touch on this because it's a big part of my life, where I'm at and why I'm able to like be in Tampa, do the things I'm doing with like the mindset I have. And so my faith has been huge in my life. I actually got baptized last Sunday. It was one of the best moments of my life. It was just like life changing. I mean, I had already been saved, but for me, it was going public with my faith and just that next step for me. And so it was super cool at Radiant Church in Tampa, Florida, which is an amazing home church. It's the first home church I've actually had, which makes a huge difference. And so, the different aspects of growing your faith are through the word, through prayer, through community, and through church. And so those are super important. And finding that home church was like that last piece. And the messages are great. The worship is great. And the people are great. So that's been huge for me. Because when I moved down here, I knew zero people. And like moving to somewhere where you know zero people is uncomfortable. I had nights where for the first month, I was living in a 5-bedroom house by myself, one of my parents' friend's house, to see where I wanted to move. And I was in that house by myself. It was lonely. It was scary. I was isolated from like the rest of Tampa, and I wasn't in the right area. And so kind of this time where I was lonely, I put myself in the most uncomfortable situation, knowing nobody, but kind of that experience, and then finding the church, finding my faith, and doing a challenge 75 hard, which got my content journey re-sparked. It got me posting content again, which I did a couple of years ago, but I was always waiting to start again. And I finally just did it with this challenge. I posted every single day, and didn't miss a day of content, didn't miss a day of 75 hard, completed the challenge. And so I want to speak on that a little bit. 75 hard was amazing. And there was a little bit of fluff in there, like 2 workouts a day might be excessive, but it taught you the discipline and the constant like determination of not missing a day no matter how you feel. And so keeping a promise to myself for 2.5 months was amazing, because it taught me like, if I can do this, what promises can I not keep to myself? So that was the biggest thing. My physique changed, how I thought changed. I started reading books, and I realized how important and knowledgeable books are. You can gain so much wisdom from people who have lived for 20 or have experience of 20 years in a certain subject or topic or hacks or productivity things, and you can take those from a book and apply them to your life. The key is applying what you learn in books to your life, because if you just read it and never use it, then you don't know. And something I've been, one of my digital mentors per se, or someone I watch a lot on YouTube now, is Dan Martell. And he talks about how if you don't apply what you learn, you're just taking information and it's not making it of any use. So he's like, read it just in time. Don't read it in preparation, because if you're just reading stuff that has no applicable cause to your life, then what's the point? But if you're going through, let's say you're starting a business or you're starting a new venture, it's like now is the time, just in time, read that book that could help you in that venture. And so my faith, actually, I was saved about a year and a half ago. And so let's rewind back to May. I graduated from the University of Alabama. And so in my time in Alabama, I was ups and downs. And my last year, I had a great time, but I was still living a lifestyle that I wasn't quite proud of, or it didn't feel right. It wasn't fulfilling. It wasn't a life that I was proud to be living. And I was still waiting for like the right time, or like I was tempted by worldly desires at the same time when I was trying to live like a godly life. And I was so torn, and I was like lukewarm in some sense. And I just wasn't committed to living a life to bring myself like a greater fulfillment. And so that kind of leads to, 75 hard, moving to Tampa, changing my environment. I'm living the lifestyle I've wanted to, and I'm more fulfilled than I ever have been. Not perfect, but I'm working on it every day, like trusting in God with the way I'm living and living in that way. And so I came to my faith, and I was saved when I was experiencing probably the darkest time of my life. So the darkest time in my life, the toughest time, brought me to the best thing in my life, which is my faith in God and my relationship with Jesus. And so I was experiencing something called OCD, so obsessive compulsion disorder. And it's something that I've dealt with for probably 4 or 5 years now, but I never knew what it was. I could never put a name to it, but it's been this overarching just thing I've dealt with, thing that's just been tough for me, and still deal with it to this day. But my faith and my relationship with Jesus has made it so much better. It has made, I used to see this OCD as something like that would prohibit me, like until I fix this, then I can't be happy. But that was the completely wrong way to see it. And when I went through this summer where I was saved and I did a lot of self-reflection, self-work, I saw it as no, the OCD is what makes me me, and I love myself, and I'm accepting of who I am right now, and I'm happy now to strive and grow to get better every day. And so when my mindset changed from I'm not okay now, but when this, then I can be okay, to no, I'm okay now and I'm happy now, and I'm going to strive to grow every day. That's when I could, be grateful, be present, and be happy in the day I was in, and not be waiting for something that might never come. And at the end of the day, it's not something to fix. It's what makes me me. So sharing some of that OCD, but I was experiencing something called somatic OCD. So somatic OCD is when you are kind of experiencing things and you feel them on like a manual mode. That's my best way to explain it. So I had experience where I was feeling every time I would breathe, swallow. It was kind of triggered by an event. I was in a sauna and I kind of got nauseous, but I was now feeling manually that I was breathing, that I was swallowing. And for probably a week or two, it felt like I was like in a living hell. It felt like I was in a cave and I couldn't get out. It was like a darkness. And I can't really explain it, but I literally just sat down. I started praying. I started reading the word, and slowly but surely, naturally getting better and better as I figured out what it was, what I was dealing with, how to deal with it, like calming myself down, breath work, meditation, all these different small things and things to deal with this anxiety that I'd never experienced before. And so the OCD kind of played a part in my life for such a long time without knowing what it was. But through my faith, through being saved, it's made every day, it's calmed my anxiety down extremely. And I just live a life of gratefulness, even though there are some tough times. So that's kind of the story of, the things I've dealt with to get me to this point, how I got here, what the process is. And so going forward, the goal is to have guests on every week. My goal is not to miss a week for however long, but I'm going for an episode a week. And then, there's going to be clips, there's going to be whatever. So I'm planning to release my podcast every Monday morning on all platforms. I don't know what time yet, but that's the goal. And have these people on that inspire me, that I'm curious to talk to, because at the end of the day, I don't want to have people on here that I'm not interested in, but might be, a bigger guest than if someone I'm interested in. So everyone I want to have on are people that I'm interested in, that I think can provide my audience with something awesome to listen to apply to their life, to take away, or maybe reflect on. Because at the end of the day, there's so many people on this self-improvement journey, and there's so much information out there. So it's like you got to pick a couple things, and you also have to do trial and error. Something I've realized lately is, your vision of success, your definition of success is going to be way different than someone else's. So something I struggle with is, you see someone else, their success is the cars, the this, the that, but that might not be what I desire for my life at all. So if I'm applying and living the ways they live into my life, they might not align at all, or maybe I can take a habit or a routine from their life and it works great for me too. So one thing I want to urge you on this self-improvement, self-growth journey is that look at the habits and routines you're doing and implement them for a week or two at a time and see, hey, do I react well to this? Do I have more energy doing this? Do I function? Am I more productive doing this? Or does this not work for me at all? Because it might not. Just because someone we're watching like David Goggins or this or that applies this habit, gets up at 4 a.m., doesn't mean that you're the type of person that that's going to work for. And so that's something I've been tweaking with lately is what habits work for me, what routines work for me. And at this point, it's like you hear a lot of people say, wake up at the same time every day, go to bed at the same time every day. But for me, it's like I'm working a job where some nights I work till 12, some nights I work till 2, and some nights I go to bed at 10 when I don't work at all. So I have to apply different habits, different routines than the person who's saying wake up and go to sleep at the same time every day. That all kind of to wrap up and say, we're going to dive deeper into my life in a lot of episodes. We're going to dive deep into guest lives. But the goal is just to have a engaging conversation with the guest where you guys, the audience, feel like you're in it as well to provide you with the most value you can take from it. If it's just one thing, if it's one thing that changes your life, if it's one process that changes your life, routine, habit, mindset, quote, whatever it is, that's all that I want this podcast to be. It's like, I want this podcast to just be me speaking to someone and letting that reach people. I don't know if it's one person, if it's 10 people, but I love talking to people. For me, the technical side of things was very difficult to start up, and not too difficult, but I had to go and learn things I've never done before. And the editing, I'm doing the whole process. But the thing is, I love to sit down and talk to people. And so that's what I'm going to be just so excited. No matter what the views are, no matter what the audience is, like I get to have a conversation with someone I find interesting and someone I can have a deep conversation with, and it happens to be on camera every time. So I just want the audience, the guest, and me as well to just get some value out of that. So super excited. As I said, every Monday is going to be a new episode. And yeah, the Process Podcast, episode 1, we've done it. We've set up, and now it just comes down to consistency. If I miss a week, who knows? But I don't miss the next week. So that's a way to end episode 1. That's the Process Podcast. Peace.